This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to have you all here for the 29th in our series of regular calls with wardens, treasurers, and clergy during our COVID time. So right to it today, and I'd like to begin us with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you praise and thanksgiving for the gift of this beautiful day and everything that is a part of it, for the opportunity we have to rejoice in the presence of your Son, Jesus Christ, and particularly for this inner journey in heart and soul that we take through this glorious season of Lent. Give thanks for the vision of the promises of God that are entrusted to us, the strength and power we receive by the Spirit to live in those promises in the mission and ministry of your Son in the world. Ask you to be present with all who have gathered on this call today as we discuss the affairs of the church writ large and writ within our hearts. And we ask you to be present with us to encourage us in the decisions that we take and the vision that we cast for those committed to our care within our parishes and within the diocese. And in your holy and blessed name, we offer this prayer. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, just a few things as we move into our agenda today, and just to begin with my update. Again, very pleased following on our last call where we were able to announce that we were ready to open up again. The word has been very good across the health units within the diocese, all of which have gone to the green phase, and we have returned to our amber phase. And I know that some parishes were ready to go on Ash Wednesday with some services. I was at the cathedral for their Ash Wednesday service. Again, it was wonderful to be back to that kind of at least the normal that we can have within our amber stage. I also know that some parishes have chosen to wait a while before reopening, and we still have uncertainty across the province and indeed across the country around what will happen with the COVID-19 variants and how quickly they will spread. But even up until today, and the reporting today is that there still seems to be a good handle on that in terms of the health units that encompass the diocese. We did get the word back. There was a question up last week about the church in Burris Rapids, and we did investigation into that to find that the north side of the road is in the city of Ottawa, but they are in the orange phase, which also covers our amber phase. But I guess if you take your coffee and go across to the south side of the street, you're actually out of the city of Ottawa. So it's a pretty close one thing up there, but it all covers into our amber phase, so we were able to get some answers to those questions. Also, I've been continuing to meet with my colleagues in the House of Bishops, and you'll notice that things are happening differently from diocese to diocese, and decisions are being taken based on what the advice is from the health units. And I just ask, I'm getting some feedback on I don't know if everyone else is getting that, just to get everybody on mute, and then we'll roll on from there. The different dioceses are approaching the reopening this time from the current lockdown in a different way, and that's basically because we're dealing with different stages across the entire province. But where we're consistently green, we have made that decision to reopen, and we're carrying on from there with that. But we continue to take counsel and receive the advice that we do. And Alec will be referencing a bit too. The executive officers continue to meet weekly and look at the decisions that are being taken from diocese to diocese, and also the advice that we're receiving. The other thing that I just want to touch lightly on is we had a presentation at Synod Council on Tuesday night from the Pandemic Financial Response Team. And you'll all recall that process was put in place and how to deal with the CEWS money that is attached to the diocesan office and to my office. And that money has been placed in a restricted fund. And you'll remember there were 3 gates to go through to get that. The first 2 I refer to as objective gates around income and investments, which is basically mathematics and numbers. And the third one is what I refer to as a subjective gate, and it talks about the mission and ministry being undertaken in the parishes that qualified after those first 2 gates. And as I said to Synod Council on Tuesday night and to the pandemic financial response team, the parishes that were identified were invited to apply, and we have 11 churches that qualify for that. 9 have made application. 2 more are coming in for next month. Those 9 that were approved by Synod Council on Tuesday night. But what I want to say is that I was absolutely blown away by the quality of the presentations that came in from those churches and the things that are happening in terms of their mission and ministry, the challenges that they faced because of COVID-19, but also what they've been doing even pre-COVID that they've been able to carry on doing in the face of COVID and making sure that they're dynamic presence within the life of their communities. So I was just blown away by that. As you'll recall, that subjective standard was based on responding to questions that were rooted in the marks of mission for the Anglican Communion and also the Warren book on healthy churches. And there'll be a little bit more said about that later in the call today. But I just wanted to highlight that and to extend my thanks and appreciation for those who made those applications. I also think that the questionnaire that the PFRT put together would be really good for any parish to take a look at in terms of what you're doing in the life of your church and how you see yourself moving forward into the future. One of the things that came up regularly in the bishop's calls is our concerns about parishes that the term that's used that are in a liminal space. They're kind of in that threshold space and a real question mark around their future. And COVID put such stress on those parishes. We wondered if when we come out of this, that there'll be a lot of parishes that won't make it out the other side of COVID-19. But again, when I look and see what the parishes have been doing in this diocese, and to be able to be in a position where we can provide that support for parishes that were particularly challenged through COVID-19, I have a very positive and hope-filled feeling for the future based on that, the things that are happening there. So I just wanted to reference that. I'm also continuing to do my weekly morning prayer services, and those services are made available for folk who may not be able to access online services or their parish is not in a position to be able to do that. And there are a number that tie into that service over the week. What I'm going to be doing through Lent is because of those particular ministry programs that I see that have been happening across the diocese, and particularly in the PFRT applications that came in. I'm going to do, in addition to the prayer, go out, Mark and I, and we did that this week. We went to Napanee and we went to the Charitable Thrift Store that St. Mary Magdalene's has there, and did a little interview with the folk there. And we're going to incorporate that into that morning prayer service, and certainly in the context of the service to offer prayers for that ministry and outreach. And so each week through Lent, we're going to try to find another place to go to focus on. And that also give you a chance, an idea, if you have an opportunity to look at, to see what some of the parishes are doing in terms of their mission and outreach, and especially over this COVID time as they continue to keep those dynamic ministries going. So those were the 3 things that I wanted to touch on, and look forward. If you have any questions and answers at the end of the session, as always, we'll be here. And with that, I'll flip it over to Alec to carry on with the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Bishop. So I think the Bishop's covered already, but our health units are green, and we did sort out, as he mentioned, Birch Rapids. That was an interesting exercise as you work through. The health unit in Ottawa is orange, and under their regulations, that is the prevent mode, still allows churches to be in the same place as when we are in green. So Birch Rapids is basically well governed by a different health unit because of the side of the street. They remain in our amber state. The diocesan office, we did reopen, and again, we are back where we were with amber, where the front door is locked. You need to ring the bell to get in, go through the protocols of contact tracing and the self-assessment and hand washing, etc. We maintain social distance. because of that, we do ask people to make appointments if you need to come in. But the bishop and I and Wayne and others are having meetings with small groups as we need to. And again, this is just the same chart we did 2 weeks ago that reminds you, outside of the services of worship, that the limitations are still there on numbers of people that can attend private meetings. And that includes anything outside of a service of worship.
Alec, can I interrupt you just for a second? I hope everyone's got the charts. I don't have the charts coming up on my screen, so I don't know if that was something you were looking for.
Let me fix that. It should have, but Lord knows, every now and then things go.
Just while you're doing that, Alec, I just saw the note that came in from Rod Brandt Francis in Tyendinaga, and I'm so sorry to hear that news that they've had an outbreak in Tyendinaga. It's affected the bus line and the schools, and certainly a request for prayer. So I would ask us all to add Tyendinaga into your prayers through the course of this week as they deal with that. So be looking more into that. So thanks, Rod, for passing that information on.
So here's the chart that I was referring to. This is from the Ministry of Health. And this chart will continue to be updated, so you can track it via the Ministry of Health. But it is the reason I put it up here is to make everybody aware, because a lot of the questions that often come is what's going to happen as vaccinations become into play. Well, this basically, I liked it because it talks about what the plan is in the province for vaccination. So what you'll see on here is that starting in March, later in March, the target is for anyone 80 years old and over to be prioritized. And there's over 600,000 people in that group out of the 1.3 million they plan on receiving. In April, they'll start into the 60 to 79-year-old age. And they'll start, I think, at 60 and then move up in 5-year increments to get everybody through. And so you can start then to see as they work their way through what their prioritization is, but it also starts to give you some kind of indication when you would expect vaccinations to be available. And again, we know that individual towns and cities and health units, things may vary somewhat. And then individual within the church, some people may choose not to have vaccinations or may choose to wait farther. But this is for the two, the Pfizer and the Moderna, which are the two approved as of today. And then sort of their plan going forward. As I mentioned, it covers a lot of information. It's on the Ministry of Health site, but it is one that we will continue to monitor because it starts to give you a view as to how the impact of the vaccines will start to unfold in our province. But as the bishop mentioned, we continue to be fluid. You know, things will continue to change. We know a number of churches have decided we want to wait and see how it's going to go before we reopen. But we do know that the province has given our health units that quick break they can apply. And decisions while we're in the amber stage, then locally churches need to make their decisions around what they want to do that's appropriate for them. The bishop did mention that that council approved the PFRT. So there was 11 churches, and 9 of them have completed all 3 phases, the 2 financial or objectives, as the bishop calls them, and then 2 that then the 3rd phase, which is the ministry and mission survey. Council reviewed the 9 and approved. That was a total of $58,600. And those will be credited to church accounts in the next couple of days, and they'll appear on their February statements. The remaining 2, Wayne is driving this. Wayne and Michael Reed back to the PFRT, and then on to council. The intention is at the March meeting. So just to give you an idea, because again, the source of funding for this was the wage subsidy, the SUS that was received for diocesan staff. So from March to December, we received almost $112,000. You can see that we put 15,000 of that roughly into the three programs, the tech grants, the interest forgiveness for insurance, and the starter kits for cleaning and disinfecting. There was 58,600 approved by council. And then there's two more that are going through the third phase, assuming that they're successful. That's another almost 18. So there's 91,000 of that 111. Council has allocated 15,000 to continue to provide forgiveness for 2021 insurance interest. So we are going to be charging interest for 2020 that's still due, but not charging on the ones that we just put through for 2021. And the tech grants will continue. So there's 15,000 set aside for that. That left $5,400 of last year's money still in the restricted fund. And there'll be more money, of course, received in 2021. And I can tell you that we've added $10,200, almost $300 in January from the diocesan staff SUS. So there's about just almost $16,000 now back in that fund will become available. The intention is that as 2021 rolls out, we'll look at what the impacts look like and what the right things to do with that are. The PFRT will continue its work in 2021. Sorry, I think I lost a chart somewhere. I shuffled things around and somewhere in here, I do have a chart. I did. Well, that is strange. My apologies. What I can tell you is that for January, we did submit our SUS, and that we received $53,951, of which $10,287 or 288, as you saw, went to the diocese, and 43,000 went to churches. So you will, and the deadline for February is the 15th of March for submission in order to make that through. And I don't know where that chart went, but I will ensure that when that goes up on the website, that I have added that back into it, so you'll be able to go back and look at it. So we wanted to talk about electronic payments. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of questions in a number of different areas. So I'm going to, in hopefully 5 or 10 minutes, cover the meat of the things that have been questions. The first is why? Why do electronic payments? Well, there's a number of good reasons. One is speed. So one is, when you go to pay a bill or you go to pay someone or make a payment with a check, of course, you've got to get the check figured out and written and then signed and then put in the mail and then sent or dropped off, and then it's got to be received and it's got to go through, and then it ends up eventually being deposited and the money ends up changing hands. This gets it done in minutes or hours versus days and weeks. It provides security. It's a direct transfer bank to bank. There's no Canada Post in the middle. There's no mailboxes getting from one person, from the person that gets the mail to the person that does the deposit, treasurer, etc. The money moves directly, and so it is more secure there. It is amazing how many times when we send checks out that things go somewhere, things don't get where they're supposed to go. It is much cheaper. The cost now of buying the checks, of printing checks, of mailing and envelopes, the bank processing fees are continually going up. All of that adds to the cost of using checks as payment. there's simplicity to it. So again, for those that are treasurers or bookkeepers, outstanding checks create you more work. They have to be reconciled when you do a bank reconciliation. You've got to track NSF checks and when things are returned. And part of the simplicity of this too is that electronic payments, most of the bookkeeping software will integrate doing that with your ledgers and journals and make it easy to keep all that clean. So there's a simplicity to it. And then finally, there's a convenience to it. I'm sure you've all dealt with the fact that got to get 2 signatures on that check. That often happens on a Sunday. And you don't need because you need two officers present to be able to sign it. And of course, none of our churches would ever have checks that have 1 signature on them already sitting in a locked cabinet, just so that all you have to do is fill it out and get another signature. I know nobody would ever do that. This gets around all of that because now your approvals can be documented and detailed with email to support it. You don't need to be in the room. The wardens can authorize. So the basic principles here, just a reminder that the wardens are responsible and accountable for all financial matters for the church and back to the vestry. And that's bound as well as by the vestry, but by the CRA, because you have a charitable number, you are bound to have books and controls. The not-for-profit legislation that's working its way, the regulations for it working its way through, make sure that there's transparency and that you've done things to avoid fraud and that money is being used correctly and in good faith. The banks require certain things. And of course, there's the canons of the diocese and the policies of the diocese. So all payments or transfers, anytime a church puts out money in any form, right? First of all, it's just the obvious, but it shouldn't relate to either of the approvers. So if a warden is being reimbursed for something, for example, for mileage or for some expense that they've paid on the church's behalf, that warden or that signing authority should not sign the check. It's really not good practice to sign a check that's made out to you. So it is in many ways obvious, but in the real world, it comes at you and you don't see it. It needs to have a clear purpose, which is part of the church and part of what the church is doing. So any expenditure approved needs to be part of that church's work. It needs to have 2 approvers of whatever you're using, whether it's how it's being approved. That's also in Canon 14. And the church can appoint other signing officers. Just a note that they need to be approved by vestry. It's not enough. The wardens can't say, listen, Fred or Mary, we want to make you a signing authority. That needs to be approved by your vestry. If someone else is being given authorization other than the wardens, and that includes the incumbent, as a signing authority. So anybody else needs to be approved by vestry. Those, and one warden must be a signatory. So if you've got 2 or 3 people that, besides the wardens, that can sign checks, and they obviously have to be registered with the bank, if there's checks, you still needed one of them to be a warden. So that's an existing regulation as well. And of course, anything you do that relates to expense needs to be documented, and the documentation, which includes invoices or vouchers or anything else, needs to be filed. So for approving payments now more broadly, how do you do this? Well, there's really 3 different steps. The first is that the treasurer, the bookkeeper, the administrator, whoever does it, gets an invoice or gets a travel voucher. And that's what really, when the clergy, for example, submit their mileage, that's really a voucher, or a payment request, or someone has asked for a check for whatever purpose, for example, a donation. The treasurer, bookkeeper, administrator receives the document and prepares, in the old days, prepares a check or they approve an EFT approval request. And that EFT approval request could simply be an email that goes to the wardens or the warden and a signing officer and says, please approve. The warden or the signing authority then authorizes the expense, because there's two different steps here. One is you're authorizing that this should be paid, that it is a legitimate expense of the church. And secondly, approving that the payment is made. And that can be done by signing a check in the old method or by sending back an email saying, I approve. The third step then is once the treasurer has either a signed check with two signatures, or they have two emails back that says, I approve, then they should then print copies of that, basically attach it to the original document, the invoice or whatever, or in some cases you would then use the check stub, note the check or EFT number when you make the transfer, and then file it. So regardless of whether you're doing a check or whether you're doing an electronic transfer, the steps are the same. It's just that the way you do it is different. You need to get the request made and documented. It needs to be approved as an expense, approved as a payment, and then it needs to be actually paid. The check issued, mailed, or the transfer done, and the filing of it afterwards. Of course, one of the major payee that every church has is the diocese. You have CMM, which is pretty much a fixed amount every month. You have insurance, which is, again, depending on how you're doing it. And then you have payroll, which in many cases is pretty much the same every month. Other cases, there's variability. So there's a number of ways you can now send money to the diocese. You can set the diocese up as a payee in the major banks. Now, unfortunately, and we've done the work to get into them, you may have to look a couple of different ways because the banks choose to take the paperwork and feed into their system according to their own sets of rules. So it may be under Diocese of Ontario, it may be under Synod of the Diocese of Ontario, or it may be under Incorporated Synod of the Diocese of Ontario. And if you have any questions there around your bank, Joyce is the one to ask because she's the one that does all of this work through. Secondly is, rather than doing it that way, of course, you can email payments. And so we have set up an email which will auto feed into the bank for us, which is the payments@ontario.anglican.ca. So some of you have previously sent them to Joyce's email. What we've done is in order to keep it clean and clear, we've set up this account, but starting Monday, you can send a payment, you can email a payment to that address, and that will end up. And of course, you need to be clear where that's coming from and what it's for. Third thing is you can set up in your payee lists a recurring payment. You can set up each month to pay your CMM, which is a fixed amount, or insurance, or if your payroll is, you can go in and set up a recurring payment that says, on the first of every month, pay the Diocese of Ontario $1,000. And you can set up that inside your banking today. The final way is that much like you do when you for example, take out a car loan or many other bills, you can set up prepayment authorization, and that allows our bank to go in and remove the agreed amount from your bank that withdraws that fund, much like PAG's work. It's a pre-authorized amount that automatically comes out of the account. So what there is multiple ways, besides a check, of course, that you can pay the diocese, can make payments to the diocese. When the money's going the other way from the diocese to you, of course, all of our payroll is done with direct deposit. No one is paid by check anymore. The quarterly investment funds and trust funds for cemeteries, Almost all of them are there now, done electronically as well. And we're working to get the last few out because we really don't want to do them by check. And even now with a limited number, it's amazing how many of them go askew somewhere. Finally, as you can elect, if you wish, that some or all of your quarterly interest payments from the investment fund can actually be directed directly to your account. So for example, rather than getting the $1,000 check, for example, from the diocesan investment fund, you could elect that all of that would go into your account rather than getting it into your bank and then sending money back, or part of it could go. So that is an option for you as well. All of these are options, and you can choose the way that you want to go. So that covers really that area. It gives you the governance and management and ensures, again, that you have proper controls in place and that the records are kept consistent with the canons. I can tell you that that's the emails and those things are how we've done it here. And that it has been key, of course, when we were out of the office from March to September and again in December and January, for us to keep moving, is that we were able to, Joyce could send me an approval request and I can make it and go back. We're looking to put new software in place later this year to go beyond that, but that's the system we've used and it will work fine for you as well. A few quick items. We've had a number of questions about Elections Canada, and I will do a shout out to thank Wayne Thornhill from Maitland. Wayne did some detective and sleuthing work and made some phone calls to get the answer for us. So of course, the first thing is that the limit of 10 people doesn't apply to government agencies. That's the first thing we learned. The second thing is that Elections Canada is responsible for determining, based on your fire code rating and normal capacity, what the capacity for them would be for if an election was called and your hall was rented, and the proper protocols that they would need to be in place in terms of individual safety. Elections Canada apparently is going to provide a payment in the range of $100, which will be intended to cover the additional costs for cleaning and disinfecting. Of course, this is all subject to the wardens agreeing, and most of you traditionally have been a polling station. The wardens would then need to decide that is something you want to continue to do. Do you wish to continue to rent to them or not? That's a local decision. I know most of you that have been previously have gotten these. That's the clarity that we now have. And of course, that's the clarity that now exists in this phase of our color system. And of course, we don't know when an election will be called, but Election Canada has to do their work to be ready in the event of. Charitable donations. And this has come up a number of times, and it often does this time of year. The CRA is actually quite stringent on what you can receipt, because that receipt generates a tax credit. And you are responsible as a church, the wardens, and then through the wardens, also the treasurer, to ensure that things are receipted properly. We get into two areas, and a new one has emerged that cause some confusion and potentially things that could cause you to lose your tax number, or in some cases be fined. The first is when a gift in kind is made. So someone comes in and does some work for you, comes in and says, I'm a painter, but I will paint, if you provide the paint, I will paint for free. No issue there, as there wouldn't be with any volunteer, until they say, but I'd like to get a receipt for my time. You know, normally it would be a $500 bill. For me, it's $25 an hour, 20 hours, it'd be $500. Just give me a tax receipt for 500 and we're good. That is not legitimate. What needs to happen for any kind of labor, service, or those types of things that you receive, and someone wants a return, a receipt, they need to provide an invoice. And then the church pays the invoice. So that in my case, As my quote would be, the painter would say, here's my $500 invoice, but what you can't do is then just go pay it paid and issue a receipt. You need to say, here's your check for $500, and then they can sign it back, or they can donate it back directly. And then you can issue a $500 receipt for the money you just received. So please be very careful with that, Revenue Canada, because that has two ends to it. It means that first of all, is that painter could be not declaring income, and the CRA takes a dim view of that, and the church would become implicit in that. The second thing is that the church is not following proper practice, and they have an issue there. So that would say that your receipting is not correct. So there's a double set of reasons there. The other thing is when someone donates something. Someone donates a piano, someone donates a desk, someone donates whatever goods they are. This is not money. If it's a business that's doing that, then the same process as the service applies. They need to send you an invoice, you need to pay it, and then they get the receipt. If it's personal goods, my own piano being donated, then you need to establish what fair market value is. The fair market value says, what are those things openly selling for? So I could go to Kijiji and places like that, or I could get an appraisal if it's more expensive and say, that's what the fair market value, that pianos like that are selling for $500. So I can receipt 500. Now, in many cases, the older pianos are going for nothing. People can't give them away. If you tried to issue a $500 receipt for that, you would be in trouble. So again, it's got to be fair market value, and it needs to be documented. It says, here's the Kijiji ads that I used to establish that, as an example. The third point is where Canada Helps, where you're taking money from Canada Helps or any other service like it. They've already issued the receipt for you, right? This is not like our PAG system where we take the money and give it to you, but you issue the receipt. But you do not issue a duplicate receipt when someone comes to you and says, I gave money through Canada Helps, or you see through Canada Helps that someone gave you money, you cannot re-receipt that. And of course, my final reminder always, T3010s, if you have not put it in and received confirmation, the CRA after the end of the next year will cancel, not suspend, they will cancel. And let me tell you, it's a buggering time to get it back, and it's a long process. So what happens in that case is you can't issue receipts. You can issue them, but they're no good. And that will obviously have an effect on people if they then get audited because they're using receipts that the CRA will not accept. Last one, parish statistics. Canon 8 requires the incumbent and wardens to file the parish return, and also for them to file the lay member of synod certification, lay delegates needs to come as well. And they need to be filed after the annual meeting. Some of you get in front of offer to us early, but until you've elected your officers and appointed them at the council, it's really or set your annual vestry. It's difficult to go. That information is really critical because that tells us, for example, who to invite to these meetings, who to include in planning things. The numbers include us for general synod and attendance and those types of things, how many delegates we get. For this year, and we've kind of had to, this has been a process and work in motion for us. We're asking for 3 sets of numbers. And I know this could be difficult, and you could just have to do for last year the best you can. Obviously, the continued in person, and we're pretty good at that. We can count the number of noses that are sitting in pews. The second one is, though, online live. And there's no such thing really. I guess maybe most deceased people don't watch services, but online live means that someone is watching it at that time. It's been live streamed and they're watching it live. Or for example, you're using a platform like this or Zoom or other ones where they're actually included in the service at the time of worship. And then the third category is the one that is around if you're getting on YouTube and people are looking at it after the fact. If people are looking at Facebook after the fact, not watching it live. That we're asking to just to break that out, because those three numbers are different. And it's hard to know from platforms like YouTube, because someone could watch your service for 30 seconds. Someone else could be doing, you know, and I've done this, drive-bys, and I've watched parts of services from a number of different churches. Or somebody could be watching it 3 times because your worship and your sermon and music was so enthralling that they watched it 3 times. There's no way to tell all of those apart. They're just clicks or views. So what we've tried to do is break it into the 3 so we can get some level of understanding. So that's what we're asking for. A couple of you already have your forms. The forms are going out this week. We're going to be updating the form to ask you to break these 3 out. And those that have already received them, Wendy will be in touch with you to update the form for those 3 categories. And with that, we've covered some ground, and we will now, the bishop, oh, sorry. We also, I meant earlier, we missed covering, is Wayne, we wanted to do a quick update from the Bereavement Authority around cemeteries.
Thank you, Alec. Earlier this week, I attended a webinar hosted by the Bereavement Authority of Ontario, and I just want to remind those of you who have cemeteries that as of now, all forms and documents in support of your work are available on the BAO website. They are no longer mailing hard copy. And second, the directive to cemeteries is that burials and interment should continue year-round, so long as the ground is able to handle that. In the event that you may not safely have burials and interments, then your cemetery should be closed until such time as that can carry on. Thanks, Alec. Back to you.
Thanks, Wayne. So we'll now go to Q&A. Everybody should be on mute. And those that are on the phone, I've muted you as well because that's where some of the noise comes from. If you wish to ask a question, you can press star or *6, and that'll take you off mute. So you can ask your question. Those that are online can of course use the unmute button to unmute yourselves. Laura is, as always, online for us. And if you have a question that you wish to ask through the chat line, Laura will ask it on your behalf. So let's roll. The bishop is online, Wayne is online, I'm online. Actually, Candace and Joyce and Wendy are all online as well.
Okay, we're back.
Details.
Alec?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Gary Thornhill. On electronic funds transfer, you talked about emailing payments. So I'm assuming you're talking about an e-transfer. That's what most people call them, correct?
Well, I tried to differentiate for confusion because you can do a bill payment from your bank account, and that's an electronic funds account transfer, or you can actually email, which through your bank account. So if you're paying it directly to the other person's bank account, then that is a bill payment. And I've characterized the other for simplicity as an email transfer, but both are electronic transfers.
Yeah, because you've got payees, which you set up and you select, and then
Right.
There's the email transfer. The only thing with, I don't think you're going to have, we're with Kawartha Credit Union, so you probably don't have them set up as a payee. I didn't see you in there.
We went after the major banks. We're aware of some trust companies. So what part of what we're doing is now, once we get, now we've got the banks, the charter banks organized. Joyce will begin, and we know Kawartha is one of the several churches that deal with Kawartha. And then other ones that may want to, if you're with a trust or one of those, then you need a credit union or a trust. That if you can reach out to Joyce, we'll do the work to see if they'll include us.
So on email or e-transfers, there's a limit of $3,000 per day for transferring. So would it be okay if, say, our bill came in at $5,000 for our CMM and insurance or whatever? Could we make it over 2 payments, like maybe $3,000 one day and the balance another day? Would that be okay with Joyce?
Absolutely. One of the reasons we added the payments email address is that it doesn't get mixed up in all my other emails, so I can clearly see who is sending it, and then just ensure anyone who is going to do this e-transfer, just put in the comments your church, because I do know all your names, but it's very helpful if you just put what church you're sending it from in the comment, just to streamline it. But absolutely, you can split that up to make it work for you.
Okay, that'll be good because I'll have to do multiple payments because typically ours is over $3,000 a month. Okay, that'll work.
And you can also, Jerry, and I know with the banks, you can go in and request that your limits be changed. Now, they may not grant that request, but generally you can go in and ask for, same as on a personal thing, you can up how much cash you can get out. You can up how much in a day, you know, those things. So that's a discussion with your bank or trust company or credit union as well.
Okay. My last question, you talked about the charitable forms that we have to fill out every year. One thing I don't think some people might be aware of is if a church donates to another charitable organization, on those forms, you have to identify that you've made a donation to another charitable organization.
That is correct.
Yeah. So that's a point that people have to be careful. They have to keep track of all the other charitable organizations the church is donating to.
Yeah, and that's church, you know, you may decide that you're going to give a $50 donation to the Heart and Stroke Fund because you just had a much beloved parishioner pass away. But what the CRA is after there is there's been, again, a lot of abuse of things because a charity here in Canada would raise money for example, for some African mission and raise $250,000 and then pass it to another charity. And then, and so what happens is the opportunity for abuse, there's the opportunity for fraud, there's a lot of things that can happen. So they are very specific about you must report, and it can only be, and I'm not sure what the limit is, but you will trigger things if it's too large a percentage of your income.
PWRDF would fall under that category.
That's correct. Because that's a pass-through. We report it because for us, it's a pass-through. Money comes in, the same amount goes out. Most of churches, that's exactly how it works.
Would you?
Thank you.
Alex?
Yes, Liz.
You were talking about the transfers, the e-transfers, but I have talked to our bank and they've said that with our two signatory account, we can't do an e-transfer unless we change to a different platform within the bank, which costs an additional $30 a month. Now, I'm not sure if they're not understanding what I'm asking, or if you're not understanding, or I'm not understanding what you're telling us, or whether I just need to talk to Joyce and get it sorted. But I'd love to do it, but unfortunately, I'm not prepared to pay $30 a month when I could just send a check for peanuts.
And of course, that's part of a challenge always is the 60 odd churches of our diocese, you know, deal with probably, you know, between banks and branch, everybody deals with a unique branch or a unique credit, you know, so there's a ton of diversity. You also, as we all would personally, have different versions of what the bank offers. And some, you know, you have an old set of accounts where you're getting one benefit. And back when your account was set up, there was no conception of electronics payments. So that may be a case of you need to work with the bank to find the right combination of services, or you may need to shop for a different bank to be able to do so, because you know, most of the banks are encouraging electronic transfers because checks, etc., cost them money. They really don't want you coming in and using a teller because that costs them money, and they really don't want you doing checks because that takes processing. So yeah, I think you may have to shop around a bit to try and not have that $30, because the argument, Liz, is us doing this should cost you less money. Why are you charging me more?
Exactly. Well, that's what I said to the bank yesterday, and it's BMO, so it's, you know, it's a big bank. It's not just a peanut bank, and
So we deal with.
so you know, I can't figure it out at all. But anyway, I'll get back on the line because I would love to do it, but not if it's going to
May
cost.
need to check, and I'll make a phone call to.
Liz,
Yes.
I was just going to say, Liz, let's touch base next week, and I can help you through some of those questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joyce.
Okay, thanks.
Alex, Don Rodlin, St. Paul's, Kingston.
Hi.
We can organization that would like to send us money, an e-transfer. I know how to do it. You know, when I do it personally, I do it with a question. Same thing.
Yep.
Okay. And
Joyce?
and the email
What-
goes to the church. And does it go to me as well, to my own email?
And again, I would, when you're doing church-related things, I would keep your personal email out of it if you can, because it just keeps transparency that says your personal isn't getting tied up in this. There's no confusion for anybody, right? It's like, I would recommend if you've got a pile of checks and you've got one for yourself to donate money to, or you're keep your personal checks in a different pile than your treasurer checks. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is keep your streams separate.
Thank you.
And Dawn, just to confirm, and for everyone, the payments email address is set up to automatically deposit into our bank account. So there's no need for a question and password or whatnot there. It will be an automatic, and I'll receive the notification, and then you will on your side as well.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thanks.
Laura, do you have any questions on the?
Yes, there are a couple of questions regarding the online views. So the online live count is going to be skewed as it makes the assumption that only one person is watching on one device. Most likely there's more than one person watching on a device in a household. So how would you like to count these numbers?
And so again, it's one of those things, it's what we'd like. We'd like to know exactly how many people, as you would as well. The problem is there's really no way to tell. You don't know whether I'm sitting by myself on my iPhone or whether my whole family and my extended family are all sitting in our media room or living room watching on a big screen. So all we can do is take and report on the numbers we have available at this point. And so that's where we're again trying to separate out. The best we know is how many watched that live stream at the time. And that's how many devices there were. We're going to have to assume one per until we get smarter and gather more data down the line. We may discover that it makes sense to go 1.5 people per, based upon things we'll know 6 months or a year from now. But based on what we know right now, we can't do a whole lot better. Unless, of course, the bishop has a good prayer for us to become psychic over the internet to know how many people are watching.
What I found is that some people have indeed told me that they watch it as a couple. So they confirm for me that in fact that one device is doing for two people. So I know of at least two couples in the congregation who do watch that way, and I can confirm with them. So should I not then count that as 4 people rather than 2 devices?
And again, Ian, I would say that where you have, that kind of specific knowledge based on personal, that you can, you can adjust your numbers to make sure it's what you believe is the goal is the most accurate number possible, right? Yeah. So that if you know that there's in those, and again, you're in a smaller congregation, if you know that there's typically 2 there, then you're good. So where you can adjust, what we're trying to get at is what is the best reflection of reality. So hard numbers are good, but what we're really trying to get at is where do we really sit? And as we go forward, we can make decisions based on that, as well as just feeling good. So I would say, give us the best number you can give us.
So Alex, if a couple were to message during the live stream and they say like each name of people who's present, would that count?
I would say that gives you clear indication that there's two people watching. Right? And I don't really see a lot of reason why people would want to lie. Now, if a church that normally has 25 people is all of a sudden reporting that they've got 3,000 people, you kind of got to scratch your head a bit. But for the most part, I think, if you've got direct knowledge, then go ahead and adjust your number.
Alec, just to add into it, yeah, we're not looking for an exact science here. It's an opportunity to, as good as we can get with that. Like, for example, on some Sundays, if I'm not in a parish and I'm going on the onlines, I could be at 3 or 4 different churches. So how do you count that? Did the bishop go to 4 churches within 2 hours on a Sunday? I mean, everything is not going to be an exact science. So, but if you get those sorts of things, just like as Alec is saying, get the best number that we can, and just to have a sense of how, because this is going to be interesting going forward, and not just a discussion in our diocese. This is happening right across the country because the reality of virtual worship is something that I have not heard anybody say that when COVID is done, we're going to rip all the cameras out of the church and we're going to go back to just in-person worship. I think because of what has happened in some parishes and how the reach, the evangelistic opportunity of this has just gone exponential. But it does give us some sense of how that's working. So we have those numbers. So like I say, if somebody says, there's a couple of us here, because I notice on some of the services I go to, when you go online, a lot of people say, as we do when we come in person, they say good morning and good morning from, and a couple of people or whatever like that. So it's interesting to watch that unfold and how those real and virtual communities have tried to mesh. So like I say, don't try to get it written by the Medes and the Persians to get an exact number. Just whatever, get it in the ballpark, and we're going to be happy. But like Alex says, if your congregation is normally 25 and you're reporting you're now 10,600 views, we might say, okay. All right, that's enough there.
So I think in general, the guideline here is we want to try and be as close as we can. We'll get smarter and the technology will get more precise. But what we're asking you to do is report what you believe is correct. And if that means you count people on the phone where or you count people on, your people. So please just do your best. That's all we can ask.
Yes, hello. I'm Fred Craven from St. John's, Portsmouth. We're having our annual meeting this Sunday. It'll be on Zoom. We don't know what kind of attendance we're going to have, but if we don't have a quorum with Zoom, what do we do?
If it's an online meeting and you don't have quorum,
If we don't have it, yeah.
You can still have a congregational meeting, but you cannot make decisions as a vestry, because regardless of what we've done is we've opened up the canon a little bit so that we can handle online meetings. But the essences of things are still like there still must be adequate representation, and that quorum is established as 25%. So if you don't have 25% of your vestry list that you have online, then you can have a good discussion, but it's not a constituted vestry to make decisions.
Alex, we had ours this past weekend, and we asked people to register in advance. And then when they came on to the Zoom meeting, we checked them off so we knew who was there. But in advance, we knew that we had enough for a quorum. It's a bit late maybe for you to be doing that, but that's how we did it, and it worked really well.
Does that mean we have to have another meeting?
That would mean you need to have, that would not be constituted as a vestry. So you could still meet and discuss, but it's a congregational meeting. It's not a vestry properly constituted. You can't approve you can't do the elections, you can't approve the minutes, you can't approve the budget, financial statements, or any of those things. It would not be an official constituted vestry meeting.
Yeah.
We
Does that
had
mean we have to do it again this year?
That would mean you'd need to do it again and get. So that should be some encouragement for some of your folks, is that please, we need you to get quorum. And that's the same, by the way, like Synod Council, we've had it happen a couple of times in my time where we did not, for one reason or another, have quorum. So the bishop would continue with the meeting as a discussion, but you couldn't, council could not vote and have those decisions and make decisions that are binding. So we would have a discussion, but we couldn't actually make approval of things.
Thank you.
Laura, anything else
on that question? Can I ask a question that does relate to quorum? We are in a situation. I didn't early in the meeting. You were just talking about the limit of 10 in a meeting space, and I wasn't sure because I didn't get the context. I wasn't sure whether that applied to our church services now. No,
church. So that's why the church services are within our guidelines, because the province will allow. They've allowed a religious worship exemption, but so that's why we tried to get you to put the vestry and the liturgy together, because
yes.
if you run a separate vestry meeting, you are bound.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Laura, do we have any other?
Yes, there is one. Joyce might be the best one to actually answer it. And it's the diocese is set up for EFT and email payments. What about as a bill payee?
Yes, we are, Heather. I do know with a couple banks that there's been some delay on that end. If you want to reach out, we can just chat with each other to confirm that, but we are definitely set up as a EFT recipient, bill payment recipient. Thanks.
I do note that Trish has put a link up. If you look at the chat, Trish has put a link up to stewardship resources on the website around receiving an email from the spiritual donation. So I'll just point you there if you haven't noticed it. Sorry, we had somebody asking a question?
Yes, Alex, it's Jerry Quick.
I have a question.
Sorry, I heard Gary. Gary, go ahead. Very quick, go ahead.
It's just Jerry Quick.
Gary, you're just noise.
Hang on.
So I think while Jerry's sorting that out, one of the callers had a question. I heard a male voice.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Yes. Okay. It's David Horn calling from the parish of Oxford. Like many others, sticker shock with the latest rates for insurance. And I'm wondering a couple of things. First off, will there be a discussion further down the line about insurance on these calls, or do we just deal with you, Alex?
I mean, I've been trying to work my way through. I've got obviously a numbers of working individuals, and I'm only go so fast because there's a lot of things going on. But yes, I'm happy to discuss with you. What I can tell you is that later in the year, based on some work I'm doing with the executive officers of the other dioceses and with Aon and Ecclesiastical, is some different options for coverage. Because in some cases we are paying for replacement costs for things that we would never actually do. And so we're trying to come up with a functional replacement. But one thing that just, David, we're going to have to face is that the costs, based upon what's gone on in the world around us, the cost for liability insurance is going to continue to rise, and that's up over $1,000 for every church. And then the replacement costs in general, the costs have gone up. And then where there is something like a flood risk, earthquake risk, and we have places in our diocese that hit that, then the rates have gone up considerably as well. So we are looking for ways to mitigate, but without question, insurance costs will continue to be a challenge for us.
Because one of the questions we had was the influence of the proximity of the church to a fire station. One of our churches is within a 10-kilometer radius of a fire station, and we were wondering if that would be something that traditionally would be factored into a homeowner's insurance rates. Was it taken into account in the situation that we dealt with, or is it just a standard approach to not giving regard to where churches are in relation to fire stations? So those are the kinds of questions we've got.
Yep, and I can just, those are probably wondering the same. So again, it's been sort of flattened out. They don't differentiate whether you're here, for example, in Kingston and you're 10 feet from a fire hydrant, or whether you are in the wilds in the north of the diocese, way up and there's nothing nearby. They treat everything, that part has been factored out to try and, be able to balance it. So they have not, there is no reflection there like there would be at home around that. And that, because again, you get gives and takes when you do it. And that's been the way they've handled it.
So that's not even a starter of an argument then. So no. we wouldn't go anywhere with that argument.
No, it wouldn't go anywhere with ecclesiastical.
Okay. Well, we also have some other issues about incorrect addresses of churches, and so we need to update the records of the insurance people because they don't have the correct address for one of our churches. So, okay, so we'll deal with you. Right?
If you flag that to me, then then I'll make sure it gets done. And again, the insurance company is not all seeing and knowing. We have to tell them, and I'm constantly. And those that have dealt directly, and I see Doug Noyles is on the call. Doug's done a ton of work to try and get some things corrected and updated. And let's just say that it is not easy, is it, Doug? So yeah, we continue to work those on your behalf, and we will continue to.
Okay.
Laura, do we have anything else?
There is nothing more in the chat at this point.
Final call? Great, then Bishop, can we turn back to you for?
Okay, again, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for those questions. Excellent questions all around it. And again, just as we leave for the day again and wind this call up, to extend my deep thanks and appreciation for the work that you're doing. I mean, again, I'll never tire of saying it, the work that you're doing and our ability to be able to be flexible and nimble through all of this and deal with the changes as they come down and work our way through it. I think these calls have been invaluable in terms of, and we're seeing it today on this call with people from other parishes being able to talk a little bit about their best practices on the things they do to be able to assist and support each other. And that's just, I think, through these days, critically important. So thank you for your attention and taking the time out of your day to be present on this call. So as we wind up, let us join together and say the grace. With the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, all evermore. Amen. Thank you very much, everybody. Blessings and have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy that sunshine. I think it's still sunny out there, at least it is here.
Thank you.